good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Professor Judy Muthuri is joining us from Jamaica, and it's just before midnight where she is. And of course, colleagues in Singapore are joining us midday, and I'm joining from Harare in Zimbabwe. It's 6 a.m. Here. So a lot of different forms of greeting depending on where you are. So welcome to the EOS Ethics, Organization and Society Research Cluster session today of JCUS Business School. The EOS Center, we are quite interested in everything ethics, how organizations navigate, interpret, and contextualize ethics, responsibility, accountability within their organizations. We have a multidisciplinary approach to understanding ethics, and we draw from, be it organizational behavior literature, accounting literature, governance and responsibility literature, sustainability literature, to anchor many of the conversations we have in this research cluster. So welcome and thanks for joining us. The webinar will be recorded for publicity purposes. Attendees will be able to ask questions at any point in the seminar, in the webinar, I should say, and you should use the Q&A function to do this. So if you have a question at any time, you can type it in. Some of these will be visible to the presenter and may answer in the course of the presentation. Otherwise, I will anchor the question and answer sessions at the end of the presentation. And also there will be a satisfaction poll at the very end that you're able to complete as a form of trying to, tell us how the session, how you perceive the session. So if they have technical issues, please use the chat button, not the Q&A button for that. If there are technical issues, use the chat button, and my colleagues at JCUS will be picking that up. So a big thank you to Nicole and colleagues for doing all the organization work for this. We're very grateful. But I think extremely grateful from us also is to thank Professor Judy Muthuri, Professor of Sustainable Business and Development at Monash School of Business and Management, the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. Professor Judy Muthuri is an internationally recognized scholar in the fields of responsible business, sustainable development, and business in society. She has a strong publication record, but I think more importantly, a deep commitment to advancing ethical and sustainable business practices, especially in emerging economies. Her academic work is grounded in real impact, focusing on embedding ethics, sustainability, and responsibility in organization. She has an extensive experience in academic leadership, capacity building, and policy engagement, influencing sustainable business education and development across Africa and the global South. In recognition of her contributions to education, in December 2024, she was awarded the inaugural Diaspora Elimo Award by the government of Kenya. She's also a founding member of the Principles of Responsible Management Education, PRME Chapter Africa, and is the Vice President of the Africa Academy of Management, where she plays a key role in shaping and promoting Africa-centered management research and leadership. Above all, Judy is a very, very dear friend of over possibly close to 2 decades now. So I want to thank Judy for more than that. Yeah, I want to thank Judy for coming to speak to us. The floor is yours, Judy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for this warm welcome and the opportunity to share some of my research with you. I'm sorry I can't quite see everybody in the room, so bear with me, and that means I can't see also the Q&A. So Professor Emmanuel will sort that out towards the end of this presentation. So I come to you with a background and passion, for all things mining, especially thinking about how to embed sustainability and ethics, into mining. In the last 8 years, I've been working with the government of Kenya, specifically the Taita Taveta government and stakeholders in the region to address sustainable gemstones within the artisanal mining sector. And it is in that context I began to actually reflect about, how artisanal mining at very local level is connected to the global governance regime. And that's how I got interested in actually looking very closely at the Kimberley process as a meta-governance regime in global regulation of conflict mining. So my presentation today, I'll really just give you a very quick background and context, and then I will talk to the theoretical lens that I am adopting, which is obviously meta-governance, as you can see there. It is a case study of the Kimberley process, and therefore I'll present my findings in regards to the meta-governance perspective, and then I'll conclude by speaking to the achievements and the challenges of the Kimberley process in the global regulation of conflict diamonds, and then I'll give you my parting shots. In terms of the background, sorry, I must say this is work in progress, so please, as I present, feel free to share your thoughts in the Q&A, to ask questions that can really shape further this work, because it is important that, for me it will be a privilege and a honor to get your feedback so that I can, polish the paper for submission, hopefully soon. So in terms of the background and the context, diamonds, as we know, it is as they say, every woman's, dream. You all want to own a diamond. And the jewelry market and the diamond market size is over USD 97 billion, and it is set to increase with a growing consumption of jewelry worldwide. And we know that the leading diamond producing countries are mainly in Africa. Those are some of the 10 leading countries in terms of volume. So the way the diamonds industry is calculated in terms of the leading is either by volume, which is carats, or by value, which is in USD. And for those who might have watched the Blood Diamond, this blockbuster, you will really have seen, a lot of issues that that the industry was facing in the 90s and 2000s. The problem of conflict diamond. So if you've not watched that movie, it's a really great movie. Go watch it because it really articulates all the issues that the industry faced some 2 decades ago. And this really, affected the reputation of the industry in terms of, oh, sorry, okay, it started working. My slides had frozen temporarily. So this, whatever was happening in the conflict diamond really had negative impacts on communities, on the diamond industry itself, and it triggered, international calls for responsible and ethical sourcing of diamonds in the diamond value chain. And the pressure that we witnessed at that time was due to the devastating impacts of the mining sector. So we find that, a lot of these countries, even if they were mining high value commodity, they were they had civil wars, they had a lot of issues of conflict. There was a lot of increased poverty and deprivation, increased inequality, lots of corruption. And actually, there was stunted economic growth in a lot of these countries. So we can say that, diamond resources was more of a curse than a blessing. And the negative impact really led to a lot of clamor for change, and international NGOs like Human Rights Watch and Global Witness, put lots of pressure. They did lots of research, investigative research, and published, some key work, on the rough diamond trade. And this international political pressure compelled industry and state actors to actually begin negotiating a regulatory response, which resulted to the creation of the Kimberley Process. And so at the time, the conflicts diamond were, described as, those that were sourced by and sourced from areas that were controlled by rebel groups, and these proceeds from the diamond were actually fueling and funding armed conflict, human rights abuse, and toppling governments. Kimberley Process defines conflict diamonds as rough diamonds used by rebel movements or their allies to finance armed conflicts, which aims at undermining legitimate government. I want you to take note of that definition, because later on we will reflect on how the earlier definition of conflict diamonds affect the industry to date. So Kimberley Process was conceived in 2000, and in January 2001, the United Nations passed a resolution to create a voluntary but binding certification to stop the trading of conflict diamonds. And what we see in this is that, this mechanism is aimed at bringing all actors together to try to eliminate, the contribution of rough diamonds. Again, that's another important distinction. It's rough diamonds. It's not diamonds that have been that have undergone value addition in the country. So this is rough diamonds. And so the KP, or the Kimberley Process, governs the production and trade of the rough diamonds. It adopts also a tripartite structure, which has diverse actors, governments, market players, and civil society at all levels of governance domain. And then, so that's the genesis of it. And from an academic perspective, there has been lots of work that has been, done, obviously, from a meta-governance perspective. But when you look at that literature, not much has been written around conflict resource regulation or, meta-governance that operates in natural resource regimes. And we also know that, there is limited research on meta-governance in practice in terms of what is actually happening, how meta-governance arrangements evolve insofar as the conflict resource regulation is concerned. So this study for me is critical because when we adopt a meta-governance perspective, it actually helps us, fill a gap that exists in the natural resource regime, and also, specifically that which looks at the formation and the design strategies that are employed in this kind of meta-governance systems. And from a theoretical perspective, just for definition purposes, when we speak of meta-governance, we are speaking of, managing or everything concerns with managing and directing of a governing entity, or as JESOP 2002 states, is organization of the conditions for governance. And the most, used definition is the governance of governance. So meta-governance questions who, what, the why, and how of governance are different governance levels, as well as different governance domains. So here we pay attention, obviously, to looking at, both the policies, the polity, and the politics of the governance processes. By policy, we are looking at, the actions, the goals, the targets, the timelines. Polity is, the institutions, the rules, the mechanisms are in place. And the politics is, how actors interact, the processes of governance, anything to do with politics, power, etc. So that's basically is the lens that which I use, in trying to make sense of Kimberley as a meta-governance system. You can say this is an exemplar case study, and it's an exemplar case study at many levels. One, KP members account for over 99% of the global production of rough diamonds. So you can see that's a huge, percentage, and therefore it is a critical actor in the space. Also, the way it is structured, the number of actors, the way it comes together, it's a horizontal governance system. And therefore, it's addressing a critical global issue where no one actor can be able to address. So the study and the research questions I seek to ask and answer is, how has the KP evolved as a meta-governance regime for regulating the global trade in rough trades? And also, what types of meta-governance modes are evident in the KP process? And how have they shaped the governance regime? So the research is qualitative in nature. I adopt, a historical institutional analysis as well as process tracing to map the evolution of the KP. I draw upon, content analysis, looking at so many documents, KP declarations, policy reports, civil society coalition reports, press statements, ACTA websites. I also look at academic articles. And by doing this, I believe KP offers a compelling case to analyze, the regulation of conflict diamond, and the governance framework, meta-governance frameworks really helps us to tease what is really going on at different levels and how different multi-actors, interact to govern their work. So in terms of very key findings, I will quickly go through this because there's a lot that is there. And I'm sorry, this is very small print, but ideally it just captures, the evolution of the KP from the point where as I said earlier on, the civil society in 1998 began pushing and clamoring for change. And then the UN General Assembly adopted the resolution, on the role of the trade in conflict diamond. And it goes on, to say when the the Kimberley Process certification system was fully implemented in 2003. And when different actors came into being, then we find in 2006, we begin to see the first review and reform cycle happening in 2006 to 2010 that, begin to question and improve the whole governance regime. The launch of the Diamond Development Initiative takes place in 2006. The second review and reform cycle begins in 2011 to 2013 to solidify, some of the governance mechanism and to, continuously improve the regulation of the diamond trade. And then we find in the third cycle of review and reform happening between 2017 to 2019. In 2018, there's the launch of the system of warranties, which is led by the World Diamond Council, and this is a self-regulation mechanism. And then we find in 2021, again, another, self-voluntary, self-regulation, industry regulation comes into force. And the declaration supporting the principles for responsible diamond sourcing as best practice is accepted. We see in 2021 as well, the UK is admitted as an independent participant. Previously, the European Union is the one that represents the UK, the countries in Europe, but post-Brexit, the UK is admitted as an independent participant. And currently, we are undergoing the fourth review and reform cycle to address the many challenges that, that are within the system. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. This, I won't speak much to this slide, but what I want to capture in it is you can just see when different countries joined the KP, the Kimberley Process, and I want you to pay attention to the suspended and reinstated columns because it points to the functional interventions by the Kimberley Process when member countries are not able to comply with the certification scheme and its rules, and showing, at least that even if we may have criticism of the Kimberley Process as a meta-governance, it works. It works to a large extent or to some extent, based on what you can see there. The other big thing I want you to note is that the Kimberley Process is a multi-level, at different domains. And here, as I was doing the process tracking and analysis, I capture, the different key actors at different levels, as you can see there. So the UN General Assembly really is there because it is what the first institution that, gave a nod and legitimized the KP, the Kimberley Process. And we have, different actors that play different roles depending on, the whole value chain of the diamond. So from the production to those that, engage in the trading of the, so both the upstream and the downstream stakeholders. Here we have the KP administration structure, KP chair and working groups are part of the KP structure in itself. and therefore, they are reflected there as part of the hierarchy. KP is a state-led institution, meaning that governments are the ones that they don't necessarily vote, they engage in consensus decision-making, but they are the ones that are referred to as participants. Everybody else, the market and the civil society actors, are observers, but they are active observers who play a critical role in the monitoring and evaluation and also in the rule creation, in the sense of they will contribute their expertise, but they may not necessarily be part of the decision making. So the decision making is left to the participants, who are countries, and countries are represented in the governance structure by the national KP authorities. And most of the time it might be Ministry of Mines or Ministry of Mineral Resources or Commerce, depending on the country and who and where the diamond mining responsibilities lie. At the market level, you can see we have, the World Diamond Council, the companies themselves, the multinational organizations. We also have local dealers and artisanal and small-scale miners who form actually a huge percentage of diamond producers in many of the African countries. Then the network mode of governance is reflected by the civil society organizations from the international to the local levels. So all these actors have different responsibilities. So we see in a nutshell that the governance of the diamond industry is a complex system that involves very autonomous actors across sectors and at different levels. So they maintain the institutional autonomy, but through the KP framework, there's a lot of coordination and collaboration that is happening. And this is driven by shared incentives for the industry to be conflict free, but also for the value chain or the supply chain to be, producing and selling and trading diamonds that are ethically sourced, as well as that are conflict free. Again, that's an evaluative question in terms of to what extent, that the diamond supply chain can be seen to be ethical, responsible, and completely free of conflict diamonds. So I took this structure from the KP website. KP is the Kimberley Process, just to show you how the governance is structured. It's a very horizontal governance system with formal structures that has established collective rules, roles, that has monitoring system. You can call the meta governor, who is the KP chair. The KP chair leads, coordinates, facilitates, and steers the meta governance system, but without exerting direct control. So KP chair is from a state, a participating country, so it cannot be anyone who is not participating. So the other members vote, or rather by consensus, they elect the chair among their members. So by that, we can see that, there is no really permanent meta governor. This is because a chair is rotated on an annual basis. And then the person or the country that is the vice chair becomes the chair in the next, cycle. So currently, the current chair is the United Arab Emirates, and the vice chair is Thailand. So you would anticipate that in 2026, the chair might be Thailand, and then the participating actors nominates the next vice chair, who by consensus is appointed as the vice chair, and the cycle continues. This that you see here is what you call, or what they call, the working groups. And we have different working groups. There are working groups that are on monitoring. So that is this one, the working group on monitoring. This here, the WGDE, is a working group of diamond experts. And this is the technical working group that is responsible for solving any technical problems that arise. So for example, changes to the harmonized system of code, etc. The WGS speaks to the group on statistics that collects and analyzes data. CPC is a committee on participation and chairman. So they are the ones that deal with handling the administration of new participants. And also when a participant fails to comply, they propose the removal of that participant from the scheme. And then we have the Committee of Rules, this one, CRP, Rules and Procedures. And then we have ad hoc committees. These ad hoc committees, as you can see right away, we have a committee on definition, a committee on governance and compliance, a committee on the core document, and a committee on the technical assistance. And these committees are working on some of the challenges that have been raised in terms of the criticism of the Kimberley process. And hopefully in this review cycle, we shall see progress in terms of what is happening. And I'll tell you some of these criticisms shortly. Now, from governance mechanisms and instruments, you can see there the meta-governance combines international agreements, mandatory state-based regulation, voluntary market-based governance system, and the civil society that provides, the monitoring, the oversights, the watchdog, role. And when we talk of governance mechanisms there, we are talking of all the system structures and processes through which meta-governance occurs. So you can see all these at different level, and all these require a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration. There, on the last governance instrument, we are here talking of rules, tools, actions used to implement and enforce and support the mechanisms in practice. So these are the things that, provide the what of the meta-governance. And the question, on how integrated these all governance mechanisms and instruments are, is a big thing for us. From a meta-governance, I'm now summarizing, I just showed you some of the things in terms of mapping really what is happening. But when we talk of the meta-governance dimension and what really brings everything together, Kimberley demonstrates not a top-down control. We saw her horizontal kind of meta-governance, where there's a lot of shared structure, reciprocal exchanges, moral alignments, and all actors, come together with one collective goal of wanting to get rid of conflict, diamonds. So making sure that they adhere to, conflict-free principles, and pushing, the normative agenda, pushing, going beyond the conflict by labels to actually push for even broader human rights norms. And the KP, through the normative meta-governance, it legitimizes the KP as moral and a technical authority in these matters, and also it helps mediate, the tensions between global norms and the challenges when we talk of, states and sovereignty and the powers that KP might wield versus the powers of the nation states. From a structural meta-governance, here we are talking of, the things that are designed, to keep the meta-governance working, so the governance structures, all the institutional configuration, what I was talking about, in terms of the working groups, the rotational chair, these provide an institutional infrastructure for collaboration and accountability, and the tripartite structure ensures a balance between authority, state authority, and stakeholder inclusion. It also provides formal coordination of rules and roles and responsibility across levels. The last two meta-governance dimensions we see is the procedural. These are all those that I showed you, in the table around, the rules of interaction, decision-making procedures, and negotiations, which really shape how decisions are made, how conflicts are managed through consensus-based decisions, the question of inclusive deliberation, and to the extent to which that provides transparency and predictability in operations. The functional is how the Kimberley process coordinates activities, the issues around data monitoring, peer reviews, how they address problem solving, and all this ensures the functional effectiveness of the Kimberley process. The very important element of statistical tracking and technical standards also enhance performance and oversight. So what we see is that overall, a lot has been achieved over the 21 years since the Kimberley certification, the KCP, the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme was launched. We see that there's global standardization of what, the expectations when it comes to conflicts, free rough diamonds. They've put in place systems of certification and traceability. And according to the Kimberley process and the United Nations, conflict diamonds now have reduced, and they only account to 0.1% of the world diamond production. And the collaboration and the coordination by multiple actors is based on shared benefits across the entire supply chain. So we see, the market actors, incentives around market access, which has increased bilateral trade. We see, enhanced ethical business practices through the, self-regulation by the market players. We see more stability in the countries that I mentioned, especially those in Africa. There's been more stability and peace, with the exception of the Central African Republic. And now we see also DRC issues of conflicts arising as well. And KP has become a standard of learning and coordination. But there are very, very many challenges that still, and criticism of the Kimberley process, which it is hoped that the current review process will address. For example, the narrow mandate of conflict diamonds by rebels who finance armed conflict. that undermine legitimate governments. I think we've really moved beyond that because the level of conflict we saw in the 90s and early 2000s, we don't see much of that now. There are more issues of human rights abuses, the funding of corruption. So Kimberley Process, has a very limited view, and they must really expand that definition so that we can, they can live in the current times we are in. Because we see new issues emerging, and I'm finalizing because I see my time is up. For example, the Ukraine-Russian war. Russia is a very big and a leading diamond producing country. And it's still trading, without any issues because the definition of conflict diamond by rebels does not really address the current situation we see in Ukraine-Russian war, and whereby, for example, the biggest diamond mining company in Russia is state-owned, that is Alrosa. And the big question to us is what role do these kind of players have, or what role has Alrosa played in the Ukraine-Russian war, whether directly or indirectly? The other big question, obviously, is the exclusion. Who is excluded or who is included in the governance? In particular, when we talk about the observers, currently we have only 4 observers, the World Diamond Council, the big civil society organizations that I mentioned, and also the coalition of the civil society. So who else is interested in this whole thing? Who is excluded simply because of the issues that they might have raised? Also, we have issues of weak enforcement and lack of sanctions, especially at state level, because Kimberley Process sets rules and requirements, and states are supposed to design national regulations to ensure that there's no conflict in the diamond value chain. And therefore, really, the ad hoc working committee that I showed you in the structure is addressing some of these criticism, and we are looking forward to the final report that will be released, hopefully by end of this year, that might have addressed some of these issues. And it is our prayer that, there will be consensus, for example, in expanding like the definition, in addressing issues of monitoring and evaluation. So my concluding thoughts is, yes, KP has really achieved a lot. It is a meta-governance system that depends on, voluntary cooperation. It also depends on, cooperation, reputational-based pressure and moral legitimacy. And because of the shared benefits, shared incentives, actors are able to come together, to deal with issues and ensure that, they enforce and the certification scheme really works. But, there are great opportunities that lies, in the meta-governance system, as I've said, and hopefully in due course, there will be robust, institutionalization of accountability frameworks, and we can also leverage, or the industry can also leverage on blockchain and traceability technologies to ensure that, the value chain, there are no loopholes in the entire value chain. So I'll stop there, and I welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Super thank you to you, Judy, for that very engaging presentation. Thank you very much. Very, very helpful, very detailed, strong methodology, strong theoretical and core. Very interesting. Very good to learn about the Kimberley process and how it has evolved as a meta-governance regime, but also how it has shaped the governance landscape. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to take some of the Q&A that we have. So colleagues join in, by all means, please type in your questions. There's a question about the rebel groups. Are there any findings on who funds the rebel groups? Thanks for your question, Chipway.
I think there are many school of thoughts in terms of who funds the rebel groups. So I have not seen any concrete findings on that, but so there are a school of thought that says, individuals or leaders in different countries that want to take advantage and profit from the industry actually fund the rebel groups. And other school of thoughts that says, interested companies that want to trade without accountability also fund the rebel groups. So I think it depends on the context. Those who fund rebel groups, let's say in DRC Congo or in Central African Republic, may not be the same kind of institutional players that will fund, let's say, in Sierra Leone.
Thank you. And of course, maybe the scope of your work didn't really engage with that particular fact. I think so. Thanks for that response. I was quite interested in the the multi-layer governance mode that you presented, and I liked how you called, I think, hierarchical. I probably would have called it institutional, but hierarchical, market, and network. But I'm quite curious, particularly with the World Diamond Council, that I think you put it at the market level.
Yes,
and
it is.
Yeah, I just wanted to learn a bit more about that. So what do they do? And I'm just wondering, because at the market level, you have the companies themselves, right? So are they corporate led, or if they're not, if they're like civil society led, then one would probably think that maybe it should be in the network level, or if they are like global body led, as it were, one would think maybe it should be hierarchical. So I just wanted to get a bit more.
So the World Diamond Council is a market-based institution. So it actually leads the self-regulation of companies. So for example, the systems of warranties, the industry standards, working with Responsible Jewelry Council, for example, to update. So for them, they've already expanded their mandate in terms of not just thinking about conflict diamonds, but thinking about human rights, thinking about, ethics in the diamond value chain. The challenge is that when these issues are presented, remember I told you market and network are observers, even if they are very active in the different working committees. So like they are in the technical committee, that deals with issues to do with the trading, I'm just thinking of this, but the working group of diamond experts, for example, that looks at the harmonized systems of code and stuff like that. So they actively participate. But you see, when the market and the network structure, I use hierarchy, market, and network because in the governance and political theory, those are the terms used, in the governance literature, the domains. where hierarchy has to do with legal regulation, market has to do with self-regulation, networks, which is civil society, has to do with civil or social regulation. So with the market and the civil or social regulation, we find that even if they may make recommendations and rules, the hierarchy, which is the market, the participants, the states, they are the ones who have by consensus to say that, yes, we like this, we will adopt it. I'll give you an example. Artisanal mining has been a contentious issue for a very, very long time. Expanding, and including artisanal miners as part of the governance structure and as part of, the observers. And because if the entire 60, how many members are there? 60 participating members. If the 60 participants, even if they represent 86 countries, if only one dissents and say no, then unfortunately, that will not pass because the KP process goes, it's by consensus. So again, therein lies the challenge of the whole meta-governance system. So if you have a powerful actor that is very uncomfortable with what is going on, they may dissent and that thing will pass. So it has led to very slow reform agenda within the KP process. And really, that is one of the criticism of this consensus and there being no meta-governor because the chair is on a rotational basis every year,
Yeah, that's a very good and detailed explanation. I get it now. It's a self-regulatory tool, and that's why it falls on the market. Thank you very much. I was quite also intrigued. When you were talking about the meta governance dimensions, and you talked about the normative one, and it looks to me like I think you called it the KPCS. That's the only
the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme.
Okay, so that looks to me like the only tool through which they set the norm, right? In terms of and I just wanted to sort of query the sustainability of it, right? Or maybe, I mean, there may be opportunity to look for other, artifacts or other tools through which the norm is set. In addition to to that KPCS, I think that could just add a bit of breadth to that particular.
The KPCS, yeah, the KPCS is more in the hierarchical governance. So I think with the moral, the normative meta-governance, we have to think about the interplay of these levels. So we can't look at one in isolation. So the KPCS, obviously, it's or really all this combines both formal and informal governance mechanisms, the way I would want to put it. So the KPCS presents the formal governance mechanisms that really articulates that normative role. So they all have clear values, but then there are so many other informal governance mechanisms that are at play. So for example, the industry standards I mentioned, that are associated with the Responsible Jewelry Council. We also have the systems of warranties. We also have the chain of custody systems. So there are many, many others. So the interesting thing, if I was to really interview all these people, is look at how these governance mechanisms and instruments, how they complement each other or how they contradict, or how, the power, the politics, and stuff. Yeah, the interplay.
Yeah, I think that would be very good. The formal normative and the informal normative. I think that could be a distinction to make, and how they contradict, complement. I think that would be quite useful. Thanks a lot. Any questions from colleagues on the call, especially at JCUS, but also colleagues joining us from different parts of the world. I'm just checking to see they've not missed any question. Okay, I'll ask just a final question to wrap up, if I may. So, one of the challenges you talked about was the narrow scope, and then you talked about how maybe, I think in total, maybe in totality, the KB process may be narrow. And then you also talked about, different, that they sort of provide guidance and for states to design their own national regulation in maybe implementing this. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are with regards to how to address that challenge. And that do you think it could be a question of expanding the scope of it? Or how will that, what would that mean for, say, Sierra Leone, for, say, Congo, for, so what's the disadvantage of expanding scope when you still want to maintain national legitimacy, national control, as it were?
I think there's no challenge. What I can say is the definition is living in ancient time. We are in a modern time whereby conflict diamonds, we've gone beyond conflict diamonds, I think the issue is more or less not necessarily addressed, but we have other issues. Because what happens in the definition of conflict diamonds, it has to be by rebels, and it has to be the proceeds of the diamonds must be funding rebels or funding or to delegitimize an existing government. You see the problem? So we have new issues. We have new human rights issues, corruption issues. Like I just gave an example with Russia. The current war in Russia has nothing to do with rebels in the sense of the rebels destabilizing Russia as a country. Because now we are talking of Russia itself as a diamond producing country. So so now they can continue trading because they tick the box. They adhere to the certification rule. So that means many countries that do not have conflict by rebels can continue trading in the KP, using the KP certification. But when now you expand, it means now you can bring to question, countries such as, DRC, not even Russia. Let's pick Russia because that's a very clear, scenario. Or the case of Zimbabwe, for example, whereby the company was the one dealing with these issues. It was not the rebels, the Marange diamond mines. So expanding it is in the best interest of the current times that we live in. If we really have to say that diamonds are ethically and sustainably mined. So we have to just stop this narrow thing of conflict. But now when you do that, it exposes many states, it exposes many companies. So companies, states, because companies have their own self-regulation standards, but remember it is the state that gives the certification scheme. They are the ones that monitors and authorizes and say, yes, these diamonds are conflict-free and they are given the certificate. So the big question is, will it disadvantage states when you expand that? So that's why I'm very curious, and many people are curious to see what the ad hoc committee on expanding the definition will come up with and what consensus will be reached to expand that definition.
Good. Thank you very much, Judy. I think the presentation was great. The questions were great, and the responses, of course. So, a big thank you to colleagues joining us from all over the world. We thank you. We're going to have a survey that would come up on your screen now. Kindly complete that upon leaving the webinar. A big thank you on behalf of the EOS cluster. But also on behalf of JCUS leadership, Professor Judy Muthuri, for spending your midnight with us to tell us about this very important topic, not just for Africa, not just for areas that have been suggested to be prone to conflict or on resource, but I think a conversation that is important not just for Global South, but for the rest of the world as well. So a big thank you for joining us. Future seminars will be communicated through the normal channels. A big thank you to Nicole and colleagues also for their organization work of this seminar. So thank you once again, Judy, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. And thanks
so everyone. Much. Good morning now.
Good morning. All right. Bye now.
Okay. See you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.